Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And today we're going to have just an open-ended chat about associations. Uh, if you know us, if you follow us, you know we've been working with a number of different associations. We've had a lot of people approach us or ask questions about associations. I feel like in the last 6 to 7 months since we had our last session on associations, we've gained a lot of experience. Again, we just kind of want to give you the news, give you the tips and tricks as we continue to learn them so that you guys kind of understand the landscape. So hopefully we'll ask or answer any questions that you have as we go through this. But of course, feel free to ask us any questions, stop us at any time. But otherwise, feel free to sit back, relax, and enjoy and learn. We all know associations are kind of an entirely different flavor of group enrollment from employer group enrollments. So we have to approach associations a bit differently. We have to take, I'd say, a lot more care and do a lot more homework when it comes to working with associations. But why don't we just start by kind of outlining some of the main differences between associations and employer groups? I mean, number one, first and foremost, uh, when you think about an employer-employee relationship versus an association and member relationship, an association member is not showing up to their association and working 8 hours a day communicating with HR. There's not that kind of captive relationship that exists between employer and employee, right? That from a communications perspective, from communication from the employer on down to just communication that employees have with each other natively, it can be a little bit harder to spread the word, right? Employer groups come in all shapes and sizes. Associations tend to actually be quite large because there's a number of people unified under a specific purpose, no matter what employer they're from, that kind of brings that affinity together. But the good news is if you find a really good working association relationship, you've got a large group sitting there that you can really work with. It's just kind of harder to be able to get that message out than the employer space. So, Mark, I know there are certain things about like what the carrier is going to want to know about associations, all that we'll get to, but just on its face, what are some other real key differences
Hmm.
that you can kind of speak to between association and employer groups?
Well, I think you nailed it. Just understanding the audience is what leads to most of the differences. And it still has to do with education, engagement. With employers, as we always talk about, getting some employer funding drives a lot of the engagement. Trying to have it paid through membership dues is much more challenging. So most of the time, these are large voluntary cases. And as such, you need to have kind of a minimum standard on the size of the group that you want to work with because your participation is just going to naturally be a lot lower. Not just because of the dynamic that you describe in terms of access to the association, but because it's an all voluntary offer. And the good news is that the carriers are giving you good advice when they're telling you why they will or will not entertain a proposal.
Yeah.
Because they can see that that path has got a lot of challenges, potentially in it.
Yeah,
So
and when
yeah,
we're working in the group world, there's not as much knowledge. We're actually educating the carriers as much as they're educating us on long-term care. But one of the things we try to get them to understand is from a voluntary perspective, from an association perspective, these things take time because, like we always say, long-term care has a pretty long sales cycle, right?
right.
So it's a little easier, like you said, with employer funding, with an employer-employee relationship to kind of open eyes a bit quicker and get people to take action or have the employer kind of take action on behalf of their employees. But
Mhm.
you need to kind of give yourself, a reasonable amount of expectation setting and the carrier that we kind of need a long runway for this. We can't just kind of open it for 30 days, close it, and feel confident that we've reached everyone and they've felt like they can make their decision in time.
Yes. And because of that dynamic, usually the employer groups, the large voluntary, you'll get a big first enrollment and you do re-enrollments, you'll get smaller and smaller later enrollments. On the association side, the opposite happens.
Yep.
The first enrollment you get is always going to be like a small, almost like a pilot, and then each subsequent enrollment grows. And the reason it's growing is because that message is getting out there to more people. You're getting referrals from members to other members, and the association is just getting more comfortable with how to roll out the benefit effectively. Plus, we always have a sales team on the association side, and you may have that on the employer side with benefit counselors or long-term care specialists, advisors during the enrollment. But on the association side, it's a must-have because we also do a lot more outreach directly to the membership, and we have more access than maybe an employer would want. They may not want us to outreach to their employees proactively on the association front. That's what has to happen for people to even become aware of the offer. So
Messaging
again,
still carries weight from an association. It's just not as much as if your boss was sending you an email about something, right? You're much more likely to kind of open that email, not to say that you're going to have difficulty with communications just
yeah.
natively with associations, but I don't want everybody to think of associations as just this pure uphill battle with no upside. There is a couple of characteristics that you can really tie to associations that can make them really helpful. You kind of alluded to it. We build sales teams for really whatever enrollments we may implement, but you may have an internal sales team as part of the association natively because some of these associations actually have their own insurance agencies that are associated with them and distribute products to members, right?
hmm Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
And for us, it's about how do you find the best fit, whether it's training their sales team and they're your referral partner, or whether you're coming in as an outside specialist to supplement it because those agents are full-time busy selling professional liability, medical malpractice, workers' compensation, P&C products, or disability in life. It's going to be hard for them to add on a LTC specialty and really have dedicated outreach. So you just have to understand that going in there. And again, it's all about creating the right conditions for any of these group enrollments. And that's just one of the must-haves to make it successful.
I also think another really big advantage to the association side is that product access is not the same as, again, the employer group space. So, from associations, when we come in to talk about a long-term care opportunity, we kind of naturally get asked about other products because associations can have a little bit more trouble securing them. So, I think from perspective of being able to turn it into a sale of multiple products, other VB products, your likelihood there is pretty high because they're going to ask about whatever they don't have. They're trying to secure these benefits, but may not be the easiest thing.
Yeah, I think the group products are the exact right fit for what the association is looking for.
Yep.
When you think about what other member benefits they're providing, it's always good to ask them, what member benefits do you provide? Quick, easy, nobody gets turned down, right? Good member experiences is what they're looking for. So that's really key. And I think because the group products haven't been available on the association front for so long and a lot of individual products were used, their impression of what long-term care can be is based on that experience going through an individual underwriting process and just having low adoption, low penetration in general. So you have to overcome that perspective. I think as you explain the product, it becomes very obvious to them why it checks all the boxes that they're looking for.
Right. And you bring up a really simple point that I tend to just let sail over my head a lot is that people are paying dues to be a part of this association. You have to give them value in return, or what on earth are they paying you dues for? Right. So continuing to add to the value just makes it make more sense for people to keep paying their dues at the end of the day. So that's kind of their natural incentive to continue to add good benefits. So that's a really good point. Um, but again, I don't want to harp on, like the differences from the employer group space, but when it comes to actually being able to quote and get a proposal for an association versus an employer group, that process tends to be a bit more elongated, I'll say,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of due diligence questions that the carriers may natively have for you. They may have their own questionnaire that they'll have you fill out about the association, their own laundry list of items that they need to know about the association before they can kind of get to a level of comfort. So why don't we just kind of go through that piece a little bit? I think the biggest one to cover is that the association generally has to be based around some sort of profession or trade. It kind of, that actively at work definition isn't lost on the association space in the carrier's eyes. They still want to be able to insure people who are actively at work as opposed to, say, retirees or what have you, right?
Right. And I would say in general, there are associations that are comprised of companies and associations that are comprised of individual members. And they used to offer more products to associations with companies, but that's kind of gone away due to some regulation around how you can file insurance products. So for the most part, you're working with associations where the member is directly the purchaser. You can still work with those companies to do their own individual programs and be endorsed by the association, but you're not going to get like necessarily a offer for all the individual employees. You might get kind of an underwriting offer for all the groups that's standardized. But again, we're to Jason's point, we're focused on actively at work. So you're going to want to work with associations whose individual members are more likely to be in that demographic that are actively at work. They will still have that minimum 20 hours per week actively at work, or they can't even purchase the product, even if they are a member.
Right.
I think
Um,
Lynn has a question. She unmuted here.
oh, okay. Go ahead, Lynn.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Uh, Most associations I've been with, some are, and I've got some good ones, but some of them, like you said, are sole proprietors or small business, but some are bigger companies, and odds are, like one has a PNC. Odds are we're not going to get in PNC, but it could be a benefit of getting into a bigger size company. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Aside from the association.
Yeah, actually, that's a good upside to working with associations in general. Even the trade associations are oftentimes business owners themselves, like private practice dentists or physicians or attorneys. And they could do a small group plan for their own employees. So a
Right.
lot of times, just working with the association will spin off other
Uh-huh.
opportunities that you need to be plugged into, but you still have to get some success in getting participation with the association in the first place to get off the
Right.
ground.
But yeah, at least if we're out there though, putting our name out there,
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
could lead to other business. I'm
yeah,
just saying, just with one shot.
correct. And
Agreed.
yeah, I wouldn't even say that a group is too large to work with. You'd mentioned sometimes it's large employers. That's okay too. You can partner with their benefit broker. You can
Yeah.
leverage what we're doing at Buddy to be your team, from an enrollment perspective. But you have to understand how to position it still the right way so that you can get your foot in the door and they see the value proposition of
Well, that's
doing this
why I'm
in the first
calling
place.
you then.
That's what we're here for. That's why we're having these sessions, right?
I just gotta get my foot in the door so they don't shut it. and then
Right,
and then
right.
I bring you guys in.
Right. And
you
actually, it's
know.
the same techniques to get your foot in the door that we've talked about on the employer side. We have the group product buddy where you can look at product recommendation, even has non-employer, so it tells you kind of which ones are good for associations. You have the one pager, and if that one pager is compelling enough, they will seek more information. That's really the will whet their appetite to get the process started. So follow the exact same process to find opportunities. If they're not responding to that well, then they probably don't understand why this is such a big value in the first place. Usually they get really excited and it's almost like too good to be true. This is everything I've ever wanted from a long-term care product, and finally I have it. That's what you should be hearing back.
All right. Well, I'm hoping to go after groups that doesn't mean they're, but like we have a local Alzheimer's Association. I mean,
Hmm.
you would think that would be easy, but I'm not counting on it. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah, yeah,
because just because they know it doesn't mean they do it.
that's true. Yeah, and I think, anybody that's connected to the caregiving space should have a heart for this, right? They understand professional caregiving and why funding that is important, which of course is the foundation of all of what we do. So if you can't get them interested in offering that to members, then what group, would be excited about it?
Right.
That being said, we'll go into a little bit more detail about who can qualify from a carrier perspective, what types of groups they're looking for. There may be some parameters there to make sure it's the right type of group.
Yeah.
There's
And
like group size and things like that.
that's what I was going to say. If just say there's 200 people, I'm just guessing.
Right.
What percentage has to take the policy?
So it's going to vary by carrier.
Okay,
And
right.
it's generally going to be something where you have to set it up for a long enrollment process, like
Yes.
Jason was talking about, multiple enrollments, maybe perpetual, they call it enrollment every month for at least the first 12 months. And then they're going to require at least 5 to 10% is what they're targeting. The
And that
reality
would
is
be, oh,
you won't get that unless you have a really good marketing approach and you're basically doing like 12 consecutive enrollments because you'll get a half a
right.
percent each to get into
So
that 5 to
they
10.
will give you that year span to get that 5 or 10%.
It depends. So this is
Oh,
again where it's a
okay.
lot of building the relationship with the carriers and getting them comfortable. They will not approve associations, but only on a group by group basis on exception. So you have to come into there saying like, okay, underwriting is going to want to not approve this. How do I convince them that this is a good one?
Mhm.
And initially they're going to focus on those groups that are larger and
Mhm.
single state focused. And there's
Right. Right.
couple of reasons for that. The biggest one is your success is based on getting more local support. No matter
Mhm.
how big of an association, if it's national, it's really hard to get participation
Right.
without the local support. So single
Right. So if
state,
it's a local chapter, right,
right?
Mark?
Yeah, yeah. So local chapters might be good. The other thing they have to do is they have to file the product itself with the states that you're working with. There's a lot more work on the carrier side. It's a
Okay.
special filing. And you're like, normally,
Really?
you file a product and it's available for all your individual
Right. Right.
customers.
Right.
On the group side, associations have to be specially filed with the Department of Insurance.
Right.
So no
And I'm
carrier wants
sure.
to make that investment unless they can see they're going to get an
Right.
ROI,
And
at the end of the day. So because of all those factors, we probably have 6 carriers on the group space now that will look at associations. So there are quite a few, but most of them frown upon it. Most of them are looking for reasons to DTQ, decline to quote it, because they just don't see that it's going to lead to
mhm.
success such they want to invest in it. And their worksite carriers, they want to focus on large employers predominantly. So this
Right.
sometimes takes the back burner. But there are a few carriers that are more aggressive and interested in that space. And that's kind of where, we've gained a lot of experience figuring out what everyone's temperature is, what types of groups. But I would say you'll want to focus on larger groups, single state groups, and trade association. Like Jason was saying, we know actively at work will be in that definition.
Right.
Versus if you're working with a retiree group, not a chance. You'll probably get a proposal from a worksite carrier.
Right. Right. Okay. All right.
But
Thanks.
just if you understand it. So Alzheimer's Association, just going back to your example, you'd fit those same criteria. Are they actively work the members? Now, again, they don't have
Right.
Alzheimer's. They're just
Right.
maybe they care, they're advocates for the issue. They have their caregivers, things like that. That could work. But how many members do they have and how much access do the association have to the members? Do they
Right.
provide other member benefits? We actually have a checklist, a very short checklist that you can complete, and it will tell
Okay.
you if the group is a good candidate or not.
Yeah, and some of these associations or quote group, like the MS Association is another one.
Sure.
They have the local chapter. They have their own payroll, smaller, and then they got the other people that are joining the association. So it could be a
Right.
combo.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Actually, that's a great place to start. If the association is getting a benefit for their own employees, they can get an employer offer. That's not an association offer.
Okay,
That's just our
that's
normal
true.
employer offer. And of course, we can go down to 3 or 5 lives. So if they're willing to pay for it for their own employees, that's a good signal that they're
Mhm.
interested in offering to their members and they're going to really support it. but you're still going to get the same questions for the membership is, do you offer other benefits to the members? If they're not
Right.
offering insurance benefits to their members currently, unlikely to fly on the long-term care side, or it's going to be like a startup effort and it's going to be a big heavy lift to get them
Or
there.
what about all, and that would be then, like you and Jason were saying, maybe add the other ones first and have that on the back burner.
That's a great idea, potentially. Yeah, they might be more open to offering their accident and critical illness products first and then adding the Life Plus LTC because then they can see how much engagement you're getting on the benefits that they consider to be less risky,
Right.
and those are also guaranteed issue and great member benefits too.
And
So
they
those
don't
having
all,
those in your
oh,
toolkit is
sorry.
a great thing to pivot to, Lynn,
Yeah.
because that's a strategy that I think is very sound.
And if it's like Ninjabo, which is the North Jersey
Mhm.
Women's a Business Association, they are very keen on covering themselves. Now, whether or
Yeah.
not they're a startup or not, but they don't all have to be the same career. I mean, like
It
there's
Yeah.
lawyers,
No, it
right?
doesn't. It doesn't. Now, if you're doing the employer route, they do have to have that employer-employee relationship to get the employer
Right.
offer down to
Okay.
three, right? But if you're going the association route, that's just for members who are actively at work, and it doesn't have to do with why they're a member,
Right.
right? So that's fine. But again, it has to be filed with the state. Again, those types
Yeah.
of things are still going to be considerations from the carrier. And we just don't
Yeah.
want anyone to be surprised. That's why we're setting expectations here is you should never be afraid to submit an idea to the carrier, do an RFP with the carrier. The worst thing they can do is say no, right?
Right.
So I would say, definitely, give it a shot. Make sure you have a plan going into it though, because it's best not to just know that you're going to get declined because you don't really have a good strategy going into it. You really have to have a compelling story.
You got a campaign for why it's in their best interest to extend an offer to this group and why it will be worth their while and
Right.
economically viable.
Well,
Yeah.
you would hope, like if you were with the Alzheimer's Association, it's kind of a given, why you would want it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Right.
thing though. You got to take it beyond hope. You got to give them
Yeah.
real solid marketing reasons,
And like get
communication
the HR
reasons.
behind it first, and then let them, they can help push it.
If they have HR, right? For the
Yeah.
employees, they do, but for the members, it's the
All right,
marketing
for the
team. It's a little
associations,
different.
yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them usually have, the associations usually have a core. That doesn't mean they're getting paid, but like they have a core board, and
Right.
hopefully that's who
But
we, you
for
know.
the larger ones, they'll usually have a marketing team
Mhm.
that markets their other insurance products or their other member benefits. Those are the kind of things to look for when you're looking for the right fit. If you already have a marketing team, that means that they have access to the membership and a process which they roll out new products.
Okay.
You probably don't want to work with an association that doesn't have a marketing team
Okay.
already.
All right. Sorry to take up time.
These are all great questions.
You asked a lot of good questions, so yeah, definitely no issue with it there. We have some other really good questions too, Mark. Raymond asked, do associations contact benefit brokers about voluntary benefits, or do they look through other influencers? How are they actually being distributed some of these benefits?
That is a great question, Raymond. And I would say that it's similar to the employer space, that there are association focused benefit firms out there. In fact, there are sometimes subsidiaries of the large benefit firms, right? Will be called XYZ Affinity, Affinity Association, that type of thing. Um,
Oops.
so that's what you'll run into in terms of the ones that have established programs. And a lot of carriers have like an association division of the carrier as well. Now, if they really focus their business on associations, you might get more support. But generally, those types of carriers are going to look for very large associations. And sometimes they even do direct marketing where the carrier does the marketing to the association members. So that's what
Sorry.
we typically see in the market. Sorry, Lynn, were you trying to? Okay, unmute. Okay. So yeah, that's Raymond. Great question. The answer is yes. There's a whole ecosystem of association providers, including benefit brokers that focus there that you can partner with. And like Jason said, sometimes they own their own insurance agency. In fact, most commonly they do. And that's who our partner usually is.
Yep. And to Lynn's point and Lynn's question, like if they're willing to do a group long-term care enrollment for their internal team, what is better than your kind of allied sales team getting to understand that benefit from purchasing it for themselves. So that's the low-hanging fruit you could really start with and help your allies kind of understand what this benefit is all about, how we educate on it, the resources we use, and they'll better understand how to market and how to consult on it, right? So, yeah, just a really good opportunity there. And then Raymond also asked, are there association groups that would be more likely to be interested in a voluntary long-term care benefit? So I think we've kind of touched on some, but if you have any other ideas.
Yeah, it's going to be the same types of demographic industries that you see on the employer side. Women-led businesses, like Lynn was saying, that that's what immediately jumped out, that could be a good fit, right? Because long-term care is going to appeal to those actively work women, especially first. Plus, these are unisex price products, so it's almost like a discount built in for women there. Caregiving industries, low-hanging fruit, early adopters. We see a lot of success with those types of organizations. And then the mass affluent, right? That's why white collar trade associations work well, is they have discretionary income. Don't have their individual long-term care yet. You can help them get something quick and easy. And those busy professionals really want something quick and easy, right? A lot of the time. But there's a lot of types of groups out there that can work. Alumni associations could possibly work. Um, we've even seen, PEOs, credit unions. So there's all kinds of different, I'll call it non-traditional employer groups. The closer they are to having the employer-employee relationship, the more likely you're going to get an offer, the more likely you're going to have success. The closer they are to having some incentive to participate, the more likely you're going to be able to get an offer and have success. So the same thing the carriers are looking for is what you're looking for, what we're looking for to make sure that we're picking the right groups for you. And the worst case scenario is you take them down a path to get their employees access to guaranteed issue, right? Because they're going to care about that. And potentially you can use it as a referral marketing for individual business too. So you're not necessarily going to say like, sorry, I don't have anything for you. You're just going to say like, here's the best path for you to go down. And then you kind of take it from there.
Yep, 100%. Patty asked a really good question too. What's the minimum size association that's eligible? I'm not sure I even know the answer to that question. I'm sure
It
that
depends on each carrier because of the filing requirement and how much effort it is to do. I would say most of the time you're looking for 2,000 plus larger
yep.
associations, especially right now in the market, which many of the carriers are newer to long-term care riders and products, and they're going to dip their toe into it a little bit. That's not a hard and fast rule, though. It doesn't mean you can't get 1,000 person group, but when I think Lynn is at 200, that's going to probably set off red flags that, well, if we do a good job, we're going to get 20. Are we willing to put in all of this investment to get 20 policies? And most of the carriers will say no. If we got 10% of 2,000 and we're getting 200 policies, and generally we're getting a much higher average premium too, that might be a $500,000 to $1 million of annual premium for them. Then they're like, okay, that's a good group for us to do. But they're going to look at it really economically, business wise and say, is this worth it? Is the risk from an underwriting perspective worth it? And then they're going to go from there.
Yeah, and given the kind of looser affinity, I think the carrier also has concern that those who are going to read that message and gravitate to it are those who would not be able to get an individual policy. The unhealthy folks are still going to read that email, are still going to engage with everything, and are still going to sign up for a plan. But is that the kind of business we want at the end of the day?
Yeah. And so the carriers will also look at, are they willing to do other products? It's going to be great to have that in your pocket because if you're doing two, three, four, five products, then you can justify that their investment is worthwhile and they can tell the organization more committed to them as a carrier. Some of the groups we've even started with group short-term disability now because that was a big gap in their coverage. Maybe they had individual long-term disability, but they didn't realize they could get short-term disability for their members. So you're going to find a lot of opportunities as long as you are aware of those products to position them to enhance your likelihood of getting those approved.
Yeah, Lynn, do you have something else? Go ahead.
You have to unmute
You're
again.
on mute.
Just real quick, but if we're only keeping to say one state, it might be hard to get to 2,000. You know what I mean?
It could be. Yep, absolutely. And at the end of the day, they're going to want to start off with a state where you do have those economies of scale.
Yeah.
If you have a multi-state association, it doesn't mean you can't expand it,
Oh,
but it is much more difficult. And we have worked with some of the largest associations in the country, and you run into a lot of challenges if you're doing a lot of different state filings. Some of them
right.
may not even be allowed by certain carriers at all.
Oh, yeah.
So it
But if
is
you had a
hard. I would,
smaller association, but if the group was more like Alzheimer's, you would expect that they'd maybe take a chance.
again, they're going to want to see evidence, and that's the
Okay.
hard part. If that's what insurance carriers, the blessing and the curse is they're not looking to take a chance because they're the risk bearers, right? If it doesn't go well, guess who pays the toll for that? So you really just have to be aware that that is the mindset, that is, what's going on there. And again, can't hurt to ask, but I will tell you right now that most carriers on the group side will say no. Most carriers on the individual side might actually say yes, though. There are options there too, but usually it's like a 5% discount. You're going to go through full underwriting and, working with the products the way that an individual would. So, but again, not a bad outcome to say, hey, we're the endorsed long-term care provider for this association. They send their individual business owners and referrals to you. That's not too bad.
Not a bad
Consolation.
place to land. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. These are all good questions. Does anybody else have any other questions before we kind of just continue to run through normal discussion? A lot of these questions have been just really helpful from a learning perspective for everyone. Okay. But yeah, I think that process, Mark, the proposal process for associations, it is important to level set, with not only the association directly, but if you're working with a broker in partnership with an association sale, things of that nature, because we've said that a proposal can, take maybe 10 days for an employer group, you know, maybe a little quicker, maybe a little longer, depending on the group. Association sales take a long time. There's a lot of different people that your wholesaler may have to talk with to understand if the opportunity is even possible, right? There's not just, product team. There's not just underwriting. There's not just, um, actuarial, there's legal that they have to talk to about the actual filings. Can we actually work with associations in these states? States that have employers approved may not have approval for associations in certain states. And that's something that's a little different about the pre-sale process. And I think one lesson I've learned is everything is kind of up to interpretation, and it depends on who's interpreting it, right? As to whether or not a carrier can do business with associations in XYZ state.
Yeah. The,
Um,
the good the good news is if you do have a good association, you get a proposal from the carrier. What we do at Buddy is we provide all that infrastructure for you to make it successful.
right,
From the marketing to the enrollment platform and the billing, you really do have to also provide that because the carrier doesn't provide that for you. So we built a platform to accommodate association sales and make it easy to actually get the application and the billing completed. But you have to get there first. And that's why
right,
we're kind of giving you the conditions that are going to lead to that success once you get to implementation.
right. And one of the things from a marketing perspective that's been really interesting about associations, and you've kind of been boots on the ground in this perspective, is that associations will oftentimes have yearly events where they will put on almost like a convention for their members, right? And that's a really good opportunity if you are endorsed by that association to say, bootstrap yourself to a booth or have your own booth where you're actually able to consult live and in color with people on the benefit that they're being offered. So not every association is going to do that, but it's a good thing to ask about. Do you have any in-person events that you plan to do with your members or that you do regularly? And that could be something you could involve yourself with to kind of further that message.
Yeah, it's been a good milestone for us to say, yes, we have the group ready to move forward. When do we actually do the enrollments? We might use that event to kind of be the centerpiece of the enrollment we do. And it's a
Right.
great way for you to kind of meet the people you're working with in person and build that relationship out because they're your sales team, just like HR is. You know, the association's internal team, marketing team, they're really your extension of your team.
I think we've done that more than once where the launch of a benefit was actually based around an in-person event, and what a good opportunity to be able to launch, and especially because you're trying to provide to the carrier evidence that you're going to be able to move the needle one enrollment at a time and get good participation. That's a great way to start with a leg up.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mark, topically around how to make association enrollments a success, how to make association sales a success?
Well, just to get to the finish line with getting the group approved, consider looking at the employer space still, kind of
Yep,
like we talked about. We've had associations of like financial planners or CPAs. And to Lynn's question, there's not like one state they're in, kind of spread out all across the country, but they all belong to firms that have more than 3 employees.
correct.
So what we can do is get an underwriting offer for the association, but enroll them as individual businesses, which has a lot fewer challenges. The carriers are more comfortable with it. So don't just get boxed into this mindset, I have to get this association approved. And the carrier may not also lead you in this direction. You have to be aware that if they're comprised of a lot of small businesses, go after the small business opportunity. Go after the employer funding with small businesses. That's going to generate much more opportunity, activity, participation than voluntary. So just don't get too, like I said, closed-minded about it. We've had a lot of associations where we've actually pivoted and it's worked out much better as a multi-employer scenario. And I think that's where you might go with a lot of the trade associations too.
Yeah. I think as far as how we educate associations, communicate to associations, a lot of that is the same, but I think there's also a lot more personal touch, like we kind of touched upon with, just outbound outreach. So many times we'll have a targeted list to work off of and actually work with the carrier to kind of make that our eligible pool of folks that we're reaching out to. That can also be a good way. Shrinking the pool of eligibles is a nice way to be able to not only bump that percentage up, but show the carrier, look, we have a dialed in plan to reach the people we think are most likely to be receptive, interested in, and participate in the offering, right? So we've used 40 to 65-year-old females who have purchased a product from the association before. The carrier is going to appreciate that homework and they may be likely to work with you on that in order to kind of ensure performance and come out with some nicer looking metrics than you might have trying to reach 10,000 people at once, some loosely affiliated, some closely affiliated, right?
Yeah. Um, Another tip, and I'm going to go back to prospect. I know you're going more to implementation,
Yeah, go for it.
but just finding opportunities is just look at what associations you belong to. Ask the key person that you know there who offers benefits to your members. There's a couple of simple questions that you can do to find out exactly who the source of those products are. And there's a lot of associations out there. There's like 100,000 plus associations in the United States. And I'm sure everyone in this room, it belongs to some associations, right? So I think that's a low-hanging fruit as usual is your natural market, who your natural relationships are. I think you'll find some opportunities there. And they're going to say, like, I didn't know I could do guaranteed issue long-term care. I didn't know that existed. So that let that go where you need to go.
Yeah, as an aside, I was just a funny note. I was exposed to a couple of different directors of partner success out there in this past week, and I had no clue that others really truly existed. I'm going to start an association for directors of partner success, all 17 of us nationwide. We'll get long-term care benefits. So touched a little bit on implementation. Do you think there's anything else that's kind of important to mention there, just to give people an idea of what happens when an association enrollment kicks off?
Um, well, there's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of understanding the association's channels. You'll hear a lot of similar themes to what we do
Yeah,
for an employer. You really have to know the audience and plug into where you're going to get engagement early on. And that's just for kind of, softening the beachheads, getting that message out that the people are aware of it. But the outbound, like we talked about, that's going to be where you're going to drive most of your success. Some of it is just hard work, making phone calls to the right people, existing clients that own disability, going out to them with long-term care. But there are tools and technologies that we're using to make that easier. Outbound techniques to book meetings for our specialist teams. We're using those quite a bit now. There's um, it's all like fundamentally the same approach where there has to be trust built into it. Why am I paying attention to this? And you have to build the understanding of long-term care planning and why that's important. There's still a journey there, and that's what takes time. But getting the implementation done where you have warm people that you're talking to, that's kind of what I would say leads to success. Otherwise, you're just going to get a sprinkling of policies. And you don't want to end up in a situation where the only time that you're talking to people is when they've been turned down for coverage from an individual product due to their health. If that seems to be the direction you're going, not only is that going to be bad for the carrier, bad risk, and they're not going to keep the program open for you, but it really isn't going to be a way to get this mass marketed. So we really try to stay away from any programs that kind of smell that way. And in order to make sure that's not going to happen, is you really have to have a marketing plan where you know that they're on a consistent basis, the members are notified about the offer.
right.
So that's the key. Probably nothing that surprises anybody, but it's easy to slide into that. Say, yeah, I don't really want to do all that work. We'll just put it on the shelf. We got the approval. Well, that's a good way to ensure that you're not going to have that much shelf life on that product.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Does anybody else have any other questions for us about associations, or even just if you want to keep it more general, non-employer groups? I feel like it was pretty information dense today. Appreciate all the questions we did get. Super helpful to kind of deepening the topic here. But if anybody has anything else, we're happy to answer it. If not, we'll just kind of wrap it up and give you an idea of what's coming and get you out of here. I think that's the plan. So I hope everybody has taken some time. If you are a Buddy System member, or even if you're not and you're getting in there and checking out a free trial, just looking over some of the new sales tools we went over on the individual side on Tuesday. So, what we have for the end-to-end group sales process, we've also got for the individual side now. So, we've got Individual Product Buddy, which will take you through based on a few simple client inputs, what product types, what carriers might be available, with highlights and very handsome one-pagers to help people understand each product type. We've got the individual quick quote. This is a more streamlined, consumer-friendly version of our Benefit Buddy tool. And then something that actually works for the individual or the group side is our AI advisor, right? So you could actually ask this group question. And let's see. What's the minimum group size for group long-term care? You can ask it questions. This is the most common question we get. And you can see that it will give you a pretty nice, handsome, and quick answer. So get in there, ask it anything you're curious about. I'm actually, I'm the manager of this bot. I'm this bot's boss. So if I see it give an inaccurate or incorrect answer, I'll actually go in and kind of correct it to give better answers for next time. So the more you use this, the the more I'm able to go in and correct based on what you have to ask it. And the more you submit feedback using this red button here, this thing is going to be very, very helpful to you in your day to day. If you're in a pinch and you only have 30 seconds to answer a question, you want to just kind of get an idea before you go and do other research, this is a great place to start. And like I said, the more it gets used, the more it gets trained, the better it becomes. So just wanted to kind of give a quick review of that. And I am still working on booking some of our lovely carriers to get back in and talk to us about their voluntary benefits products so that we can get you more exposed to, from the carrier perspective, what do they offer? Their kind of rules, particulars, benefits, ins and outs, and what products they feel they have that are really strong and competitive. So be on the lookout for that. And Mark, is there anything else you want to add before we give
No,
some folks some time
I'm
back?
not gonna lie, I was kind of impressed that the group's answers were there on the AI. I didn't realize that. So
It's because I'm the boss of it.
I just got a
that's
question. Is
awesome.
there a link on there or a thing to find out what states are approved for each product?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
So, uh, generally, with some updating, these carriers kind of move fast on the group side. But if you go to our group sales guides and you go to group solutions, actually, since I asked a question about group long-term care, it's going to link me to the correct place. But you'll hit group sales guides. And for each of the carriers, I try to get a map of where states are approved. And let's see. So for the more information we get from the carriers about their state availability, the more in-depth the map gets. Like Transamerica, we have some really, really detailed state availability that you can check out in here, and even special cases
Yeah, actually,
for
and Jason, one thing I would suggest going into the group product buddy, that's got
that's
that's
also
got
true.
the algorithm built in it. So if you put the state in there, it's going to automatically show you what's available and where the extension and restoration are. So you don't have to even look at the map specifically. It's a good resource, but literally just change the state there. And Jason's going through it pretty fast. But let's just
So
do
we have
Florida.
Florida, we've got four carriers,
Okay.
California, two.
Just start with Florida though, just so I can show kind of how to. So if you click on each carrier's logo and you look at that bottom right corner, you see how it says for the first three that extension benefits is available. If you click on Transamerica though, and it's really state specific, not available, right? Okay, so that's the best way that I use to do it is just use the drop down and click on the tiles at the bottom, and it's going to tell you where the riders are, the key riders are available, the ones that we look for first.
Good question.
Lots of resources though, right?
Yep, we got them coming out our ears now. If you ever want a demo or any idea of how we use these, we're going to be putting out some more videos around this, how to kind of use this as an end-to-end sales process, not just for the individual side, but for the group side. So be on the lookout for that. I think for new study group members, we're kind of building out an onboarding process for how to interface with those resources as well. So if you know people who might be able to benefit from some of these resources, a referral partner, a close friend, business partner, whatever it may be. We're working on a really nice process to kind of welcome them in and give them an idea of how to use the tools too. And maybe you can kind of copy off what they've been sent, for your own use. We'll also probably just put out some videos and newsletters, things like that, so you don't feel like you're missing a beat. But that's all I got for you today. Really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate everybody's questions and contribution to the discussions. Everybody be well. We'll talk to you this time next week. Have a good one.